Hey everybody, Checklist Painting here with a new tutorial. I've got myself some Deathwing Terminators, and we're going to be doing a slight conversion type tutorial. I've already done a little bit of work on these guys, having them fully assembled or in sub-assemblies like our Deathwing Knight, and I've already done things like clean up mold lines and drill out their barrels. And what we are doing today is some battle damage. And I've got all my tools here, a pin vise, various sizes of drill bits, a hobby knife, a lighter, and some sculpting tools. One is sort of a pick shape and the other one has a small ball on the end of it, and we're going to use those to create some effects. Got some gloves on. I want to protect my hands as much as possible, keep them from slipping as I'm working with a brand new sharp blade on my hobby knife. You definitely want a new blade for a lot of these steps. It makes your life so much easier. Just make sure to be very careful, not cut yourself. Then we're going to be doing some chipping and creating some nicks and scratches in the weapons and armor on our Deathwing. And this is really easy to do. You want to make a shallow cut at about a 45-degree angle, and then come in with another shallow cut at the opposite 45-degree angle to create a small chip or nick or scratch, whatever you want to call it, on the surface of the model. And I just go around the model doing this in various places. I want a couple of nicks on his sword, and I'm creating little gouges and stuff like that using that technique. You can alter how deep you cut and what the angle of your knife is to create different shapes. You can have like long, shallow scratches or short, deep scratches or gouges. And I just like doing this on the weapons to show that he's been in battle, like smacking heretics with that thing. And also around leading edges on his armor to show where he may have gotten some battle damage or fallen down or hit something hit him, that sort of thing. Try to tell a story with your battle damage. And the first thing that we're going to do is these chips. So I'm just going around and creating those and being very careful. A lot of times using the very, very tip of the hobby knife is the best way to go. So you can create nice, shallow little chips, and it cuts really easy because we have a brand new blade on there. I really want to emphasize how important it is to have a newer blade when you're doing this. I would say that, like, if you're doing a squad, replace the blade after each squad. I know that that's not necessary because these little hobby knives stay pretty sharp for a lot longer than that, but because we're working with very fine little detail here and we don't want to slip or create a nasty gouge or make it hard on ourselves, I really recommend using a brand new blade. And if you don't want to just like throw that blade away, I recommend like saving them so that you can use them for cleaning up mold lines or doing other types of work with the hobby knife that you don't need it to be like, you know, surgery level sharp. Our next thing is we're going to get our pin vise. You can see I put in a much bigger drill bit than the standard size one, and we're going to create some bullet holes or bullet dents, or you can also use these for like rust pock marks or like shrapnel pock marks, that sort of thing on the armor. And basically I just set the pin vise drill onto the model and very lightly and slowly start turning it so that I can start drilling out a divot but not start a hole. So if you think about this, it's sort of a concave shape where there is no flat edges on the sides, right? Like we're not creating a hole, we're creating a divot. Because if you create a hole, then that gives the impression that a round or laser or whatever you want to call it passes through the armor, like created a hole and passed through it. What we want to do is create something that's like a superficial bit of damage. And that looks really cool. And the other way of doing similar effects is I have these two little sculpting tools with the pick and the ball and our lighter. And again, be very, very careful. You're working with a lighter and hot pieces of metal. I recommend wearing gloves and being just exceptionally careful here. I don't want anybody to get hurt. So if you aren't comfortable with working with the lighter on this, then use the drill. So I just heat up the metal enough to where it's going to not burn the plastic, but just make it a more flexible plastic state so that we can sort of push a divot or a hole into the model. And this also has a side effect of creating sort of a pilled up or rolled up edge around the circle there. And you can see on a lot of old tanks and vehicles from older wars or even newer wars, you can Google those images and you can see like a tank that's been hit by another tank round. And where that round has impacted the armor, it has this like kind of rolled up edge around the impact site from where that metal was turned into a more plastic state in the intensity of the impact. And we kind of get that effect here. So I'm doing the ball shape, pressing that onto the front of his leg armor. And so I like to think that if like a bolter round or a hard shell round hit the armor, it would just create like a divot or a crack in ceramite. And then if it gets hit with like a las cannon, it would like melt a hole through it, right? So on his leg, we're just going to pretend that like he got hit with a glancing blow from a las cannon. It kind of melted a little bit of that plastic around the edge. And then what I'm going to do is bring back our slightly large, medium-shaped drill in the pin vise there. And we're going to just drill a little teeny tiny bit on the inside to kind of clean it up a little bit so that the inside is a nice, clean, burned hole, and the outside has a little bit of that melted metal look on the outside. So this guy took a wound to the leg, but he's still kicking. And on our sergeant here, I went ahead and I did the exact same thing on this upright wing on his armor, but I passed the ball all the way through the plastic. And then I'm going to take that pin vise drill and kind of clean up the inside of that hole. So again, we have a nice clean burned through hole with a little bit of melted metal around the outside. So it looks like this guy's little, decoration wings on his armor got hit with a las cannon shot and it passed right through. Nice little bit of character there. And you can use this tool also to create glancing shots. So let's say that maybe this guy took like a plasma round and it glanced off of his armor without going through. So he heated up the sculpting ball on this tool and then very lightly press and then sort of drag it in a direction. And this creates a channel with a little bit of that melted metal look around the edges. And then it kind of stops where the round kind of either dissipated or spanked off of the armor. And if it looks a little too gnarly, you can come in with the hobby knife there and sort of slice a little bit of that off. But I do want a little bit of that pilled up metal look on his hip guard there. So he took a glancing energy round. Also a nice little bit of character. And on this guy, I went ahead and I started a divot, so like a pockmark on his chest armor there. And exactly the same way as I did earlier in the video on his shoulder. And now what we're going to do is create some cracking around that impact. So I want to show that like the ceramite was impacted and there's a little bit of cracking. So what I'm going to do is very, very carefully take the tip of my hobby knife and create those same little armor chips and cracks around the outside edge of that circle so that it looks cracked. And with that part done, now I want to show that there's like a hairline fracture coming off of that into his breastplate. So very slowly and very lightly, I'm going to start creating a channel cutting with the hobby knife in a straight line. And then when I'm finished with that one and I like the, how deep it is and how long the crack is going, I want to find another piece and at a very hard angle, usually about a 45 to a 30 degree angle, I want to create a second channel off of that where it ends in a sharp line. So I don't want to end with a hard line. I want it to be like sharp and pointed. Look at pictures of cracked ceramics or cracked glass or like layered ballistic armor that has like a metal plate with ceramic over it. When that is impacted, it creates all these little hairline fractures around the impact site. I kind of want to do that with ceramite. In my head, that's kind of what ceramite is. It's like a metal ceramic polymer type thing, and I like it when it has cracks in it. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do some torn up cloth. So all of our Deathwing Knights have these tabards, and I want to do a little bit of torn up cloth. So what I'm going to do is clip off some of those points and very carefully warm up that resin. You don't want to burn it, and you don't want to melt it per se. You just want to heat it up to the point where it's a little bit more plasticky than it already is. So it's like a hard plastic state. We want to get it to a softer plastic state. And then with some tweezers, I'm going to kind of pull on it and tease it so that we get these jagged ends. And this is a little bit more advanced than the other stuff we were doing, and I just wanted to show it because I was going to do it for this model anyway before the painting process, and I decided to film it for you guys. So you can either heat up the plastic or you can heat up the tweezers themselves. Again, you're working with a fire source and hot pieces of metal, so wear gloves, be very, very careful. I found that with this density of plastic that Games Workshop makes, heating up the tweezers is a little bit easier to do than trying to heat up the plastic. So, your mileage may vary. If you've never done this before, don't do it with something that is near and dear to your heart. Like, use it on some scrap plastic until you sort of figure out how long to heat it up, how close or far away from the flame you want to get, or use your tweezers to do it and heat up the tweezers and do it that way. But basically, you just want to pull out a bunch of strands on that plastic and then kind of clean it up to taste so you get some jagged looking cloth that's been torn or burned up. So I did a little bit of extra work off camera because it was a little hard to do it. And you can see that it did end up working out the way I wanted it to. And I went ahead and did all three of the steps that I showed. So the armor, chips, and scratches, the pockmarked divots, and the heat burn or heat impact, shell impact stuff on that guy. And I think it turned out great. One big thing I want to leave you with is know when to stop. Know when you have enough weathering on your models, because if you have too much, it can not convey the story you want. So know when to stop. Less is more. Hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll catch you next time.